In this video, I'm going to tell you whether or not the new White Scar spray from Games Workshop is worth it. I love painting miniatures for tabletop. That is kind of my jam, as the kids say, and I do it a lot. And I like to do it quickly if possible, and so for the last, I don't know how many years now, a good long time, since probably at least 2018, 2019, I've been, well, maybe actually longer, but nonetheless, I've been doing a thing where I like to prime the model black or some other dark color, kind of depends on the model and the color scheme, and then do generally like a white highlight over the top, and then use transparent colors, to bring out the color. It's kind of like what they used to do when they used to colorize black and white movies. They would use a computer to take that black and white picture and just put patches of like transparent color over the skin and the sky and the this and the that. And then it would, because that color was transparent, you would see dark, blue to light blue, or dark, Caucasian flesh to light Caucasian flesh, and that kind of stuff. And it was relatively simple. I mean, I had to do it for 24 frames a second, all that stuff. But when you're doing it for miniatures, you're using a transparent color over the blend that you already did in the zenithal step. I did a video about zenithal not quite a year ago. Pachow. If you go watch it, I'm out of focus through all of it, and it still makes me kind of unhappy, so, just FYI. But in that video, what I talked about is the best ways I thought to put that zenithal highlight onto your models. And for me, to this day, it is still airbrush. So generally, you prime the model black, and you can do it however way you want. You might want to use an airbrush, you might want to use a regular, hand brush, a brush. You might want to use a rattle can, however you want to take care of getting that model to be black, or like I said, sometimes other colors depending on your color scheme. But generally, if you don't know your color scheme already, starting with the black and white is actually a lot better. If you're doing a bunch of, orcs, and they've got a lot of, skin that's going to be green, you might want to start with a brown and then use a highlight of white over the top of it. And then when you put your green, whatever color you pick from contrast or speed paint or whatever, it gives it a more interesting kind of variation. But you could also do it with black and white. Anyway, my point is you start with black and then you go and you put white over the top of it. And I generally prefer to use airbrush because, like I mentioned in that out of focus video, generally the blends look smoother. Now, you can also, besides using an airbrush, or even in conjunction with an airbrush, you can also use a makeup brush, which I also talked about in that video. Get yourself a big, fat, cheap makeup brush from the dollar store or whatever, dry brush white over the top of that black, and that also will do a pretty good job of doing your zenithal. The one way of the three that I talked about in that video that works, in my opinion, the least well is using a white rattle can spray over the top of your black primer. The main reason that using a white rattle can spray over the top of your black primer to get a zenithal, the main reason is because generally white rattle can spray is terrible. Just about every company out there that I've ever used their white rattle can spray has been too speckly. You get these big kind of dots all over the model, and it doesn't look right. It looks, and again, in that video, I kind of talked about how it just isn't the best of the three different possibilities in that situation. Now, that being said, some people just don't have access to an airbrush. Maybe you live with a bunch of roommates, you just don't have room to put an airbrush, or you just, you can't, you don't have a basement, like whatever. There's lots of different reasons, or you can't afford one. They're not super expensive, but still, maybe you just don't have access to it. And maybe you don't like the look of the dry brushing when you do that. So you're like, I'm going to try a rattle can. And like I said, in most situations, no matter how much you shake it, no matter how much you warm up the can in a bowl of hot water, like all those different things, they generally don't look great. And so that's why in that video, I was like, I don't know that I would suggest doing it with a rattle can. But recently, Games Workshop came out with a new color called White Scar. It's technically not a new color. I mean, it's white, Before this, it was Corax something or other. Corax white, I think. And it came in a rattle can. And now they've got this new stuff. Now, when they came out with this new color, and they're like, again, new can, not new color. And they said, we're making this new can, and then we're making a White Scar instead of Corax white. I didn't understand why. And then they said, it's a smoother formula to give you smoother results. And I was kind of interested in what they meant by that. Now, let me just start right away by saying that Games Workshop doesn't call any of their rattle can primer sprays that we usually refer to them, they don't call them primers anywhere on the website. I looked through all of them. Every single one of them, they just say it's a white spray, good for undercoating or base coating and that kind of stuff. Or it's a red spray, good for undercoating and base coating. But they don't refer to them as a primer. Primer sprays have different kind of chemicals in them that cause them to adhere a little bit better to the plastic, the metal, whatever. You know, there's different like types of etching and this and that that's going on behind the scenes. What these cans are designed to do generally is just be a decent surface for you to put paint on. Now, all of them, including the new white scar, are what they refer to as a matte finish. The only two that aren't a matte finish are Wraithbone and Gray Sear, which came out at the same time that contrast paints came out. And those are referred to on the website as satin finish, so they are slightly different. This new stuff is not satin, it's a normal old, plain old matte finish. So I thought, okay, I've got these Chaos Cultists that I painted a long time ago, actually for another video, a video about rattle can tricks. And you can watch that here. Pachow. And in that video, I talked about using different colors of rattle cans. You use a dark green and then a light green. And it's kind of like a zenithal again, except you're just basically going, I'm priming, but also putting a color gradient onto the model. So all I really have to do then is paint the skin and the guns and a couple extra stuff, and the rest of their robe or whatever is already finished. So I had done that, and then they sat. Not all of them. Some of them I actually painted up, and obviously for that video. But a lot of them sat just at their weird two-tone colors in my basement for a very long time. And recently I decided I wanted to build a Chaos Cultist list for Grimdark Future Firefight from One Page Rules. So I thought I should probably reprime these guys because they've been sitting around, they're real dusty, and I wanted them all to be that more white to black gradient again, because I didn't know what color schemes I was going to do. I get the feeling it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit chaotic, because, Chaos Cultists. Anyway, so I thought, all right, I'll just make sure to, prime them up with my airbrush and get the zenithal ready so I can have something to paint on Twitch, let's say. But then it was a really nice day out. So it was early October, and it was one of those days where you're like, if I'm going to be priming stuff with rattle can at all, today is like that day when I should do that. It was just perfect humidity, like not really any wind, just the right temperature, the whole deal. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to test the new White Scar spray and see how well this stuff works as a zenithal. So I first started off by taking these models and spraying them black. And generally the black that I like to use when I'm priming models is stuff from Krylon. It's Krylon Camouflage, and it's ultra matte, so it's and it sticks to plastic really super well too, which is a great thing you want. I don't generally, again, like I said, when I'm painting miniatures, I don't generally prime with rattle can anymore, mainly because if I'm working on 1 or 2 or 3 miniatures, I feel like I'm wasting a lot of paint by spraying them all with rattle can. If I was doing a dozen, different story. I generally use rattle can these days for terrain because it sticks better to the plastic terrain kits, those types of things, and then you treat your terrain a little bit more roughly, and so there you go. But I thought, I'm going to try this out, maybe make some video content for it. Look at that. Anyway, I sprayed the stuff all black, let it sit for 15 minutes, and then came back with the White Scar, not really expecting much. I was pleasantly surprised. It does, after shaking, quite a bit. Always super important to shake the rattle can as much as you can. 3 to 5 minutes easy of just constant shaking beforehand if you want it to come out nice and smooth. Also, it needs to be kind of warm. Like I said, it was like low 70s, so that's not too bad. On the back of the can here, they say that you should spray between 59 degrees Fahrenheit and 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 15 to 25 Celsius. So I was right in that zone. Everything was cool. Humidity was good. It was, like I said, not really any wind. And I went in and started spraying with this stuff, and it actually came out very smooth. I was incredibly surprised. I went through and just touched them from above. And generally when I'm doing a zenithal, I'm trying to get a little bit more light on the face. It may be a little darker on the back side of the model, a little bit. Not too bad. Not like a complete straight line where they're white on the front and black on the back. But generally, I'm trying to focus a little bit more on the face because that's what people focus on when they look at their miniatures a lot of times. So I worked with that stuff, and I got to say, it doesn't look bad at all. It actually looks quite nice and has a nice blend to it. Here is a picture of On the left is a model that I did with airbrush some time ago. It's a model that I usually have sitting on my desk when people ask about Zenithal when I'm doing a Twitch stream. I can pull this up and look, show it to people on camera and see, this is what a Zenithal highlight looks like. And that's done with an airbrush using a Monument black primer and then Monument white primer, which is my kind of go-to these days for Zenithal when I'm using my airbrush. The guy on the right was one of the cultists that I did with that black Krylon camouflage stuff and the white scar. And I'm really pretty impressed. And the stuff took regular, contrast paints really well as well. Like basically what I did was I took 2 of them out of the, 10 or 11 of them or whatever that I kind of got all primed up that day. And I took 2 of them and decided I just want to speed paint these as quick as possible. So what you're seeing here, it's all contrast paints, except for the metallics, obviously, which are just silver metallic paint. Did it on the knives and the little touch up in the gun here and there. And then I just threw a little tiny bit of wash over the metallics. I didn't put wash anywhere else on these models. And I really generally like to paint with, like this is the base for me generally. And then I like to go from here and add in some washes and do a little bit of highlights and stuff like that, but not a ton. But honestly, these look really good right from the get. Like this is, again, like I said, just simple contrasts over that black and white, and then a little bit of metallics, a little bit of wash on the metallics. And these guys are ready to go. I didn't do their bases yet and all that kind of stuff, because like I said, I'm going to go back and touch them up so they match the rest of the guys, so I'm ready for my Games of Grim Dark Future firefight. But I gotta say, the white scar stuff did great. It was surprisingly good and smooth. Now, some things to, again, keep in mind. Environment, shaking a ton, making sure that the can is a little warm. Like I set it in the sun, basically is what I did, because it was a lovely sunny day. If it's kind of cold where you are, you might want to get a bowl of warm to hot water and set this in it to kind of like really make it smooth. The other thing is age. These, I got this maybe a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, month and a half, I don't know. If a can has been sitting around for a really long time, primer has potentially, and again, this isn't necessarily primer, but just spray cans in general, have a tendency to start getting bad sort of quickly. If a can's been around for a year and a half, 2 years, I've found times when it just doesn't come out right. It comes out all fuzzy and weird, and you can brush it off with your fingers and it gets all over. And so this is, again, relatively new. So if you go to a store and you find some stuff and it's not the white scar, they sell the GW stuff and it's the Corax, you don't know how old it is. If it's the white scar, the stuff currently is relatively new because it just came out. So that's something to think of too. When I buy a can, a rattle can like this, I generally write the date. I haven't done it on this one yet, but I write the date on the can so I know, oh, this is a can that I've had for 5 years. I bet this isn't going to work that well. Or, hey, this is a can that I bought recently and it's not a bad idea. So brass tacks, is it worth $22 a can, especially for a 9.5 ounce can? Like normally rattle cans I think are 11. These are even slightly smaller than that. 270 grams for those of you using the metrics. It's if you don't have access to an airbrush and you have more than just a few models that you want to do this Zenithal to, then I would say probably. Now, are there other cans out there that maybe work better than this? Possibly. I've, Lord knows, not tested every white primer or white spray can in the world out there. Sandable auto primers, sometimes those used to be my go-to back when I just did rattle can before I had an airbrush. I'd go to the parts store, or auto parts store. Those work pretty well. But I got to be honest, if I was doing a bunch of miniatures, at least a dozen, if not more, and I wanted to work with a rattle can, this would be the white that I would actually pick, even at $22 a can, because it would really do the job. And sure, I would run through maybe 24 models and then I'd be out of paint, but that's still not terrible. And you would get a really nice, smooth coverage. Now, if you were just trying to like paint a model white, because you just want to work over white, not a white to black Zenithal, but just white, then I would tell you to use nearly anything because it won't matter as much. But when you're trying to get a nice smooth gradient sprayed over that black, the white scar stuff works actually quite well. So if you've been looking for a white paint to pick up, because you don't have an airbrush or you don't like dry brushing or any of those kind of different things, I hope this video was kind of helpful for you. If there's a paint out there that you like better, you've tried this, and you like something better, and maybe it's cheaper, certainly probably is, let us know in the comments below. I appreciate it. If you like this video, click on the like button. It really does help, and it doesn't cost you nothing. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that too. I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching.